You are performing this repair at your own risk. You cannot be held responsible for any injuries to yourself or damage done to your device while attempting a repair. In this video, we'll be demonstrating how to replace the sync port assembly in the iPad first generation. Before we begin prying up the screen, we'll want to make sure our iPad is powered off. Now here's a close-up look at where we'll actually be prying. So it's going to be in between the metal and the rubber seal that goes around the perimeter of the screen. You don't want to pry in between the glass and the rubber seal. So what we're actually going to do is pry in the areas of the locations of these metal clips that are located around the perimeter of the iPad. Here's a look at the locations of these metal clips around the perimeter of the screen. While you're prying up the screen, many of these clips will break, so you should also purchase a replacement set of mid-frame screen clips. While prying up the screen, you'll want to stay away from the sync port, the loudspeaker, the side volume and mute switches, the power button, the headphone jack, and if you have a 3G version, the SIM tray. We'll now take our metal wedge and begin prying up around the screen. As you can see, the iPad we're working on already has a cracked glass. Now if your screen's fine and you're just opening the iPad to replace some internal component, it's extremely possible to open the iPad without cracking the glass, as long as you're careful. Once we've freed all the clips, we'll want to open the iPad screen on an angle from the side of the SIM tray. This will allow us access to a total of 4 cables in the 3G and 3 in the Wi-Fi, difference being the 3G antenna. These cables will need to be removed so that we can lift up the screen assembly. This is a very important step, so we're going to give you detailed close-up video showing you how to remove each of these cables. The first cable we'll undo leads to the digitizer. It's actually one cable that splits into 2 ports. And we'll remove this by flipping up 2 black tabs that are currently in the horizontal position. We'll want to flip these up so that they sit in the vertical position, and this will release the tension holding those cables inside of the port. And then we can simply slip that cable out of its port. Now the next cable we'll remove leads to the light sensor, and this simply unplugs from the board. So we'll wedge our case opener tool under there and gently lift in the upward direction. This next step will only go for the iPad 3G. If you just have a Wi-Fi edition, it will not have this cable. So we'll go ahead and unplug this antenna from the board in the same manner we used to remove the plug leading to the light sensor. It will simply lift up and unplug from the logic board. we have one final cable to remove, which leads to the LCD screen. Up until you reach the port, the cable is held in with tape. So we'll peel that back and free it from the adhesive. Now we're going to use this black strip to lift up the clamp that's holding this cable in place. So we'll lift it up with our fingers as shown here, and that will allow us to slide that cable out from its port. The front assembly is now completely separated from the rest of the iPad. There are a total of 5 T4 Torx screws that we'll need to remove in order to replace the sync port. We'll first remove the 2 Torx screws that are securing the plug in place. Now we'll take our non-conductive plastic pry tool and unplug this piece from its port on the logic board. And we'll continue on to remove the 3rd screw. Now it should be noted that the screws at the top that hold the plug in place are longer than the other 3. And we'll now remove the 2 final Torx screws holding this piece in place. We're not yet free to remove the part from the iPad. On the underside, there are still 2 cables that are attached and will need to be unplugged. To get access to these cables, we'll gently turn this part over as shown here. There is a small plastic piece that covers the ports where these cables plug in. Take your small flathead screwdriver and twist in the location shown here. That will easily remove that plastic piece and expose the cables. We'll again use our small flathead screwdriver to carefully pry out these plugs. Once you've pried them up slightly, you can wiggle them to free them from the ports. Now we'll grab our replacement sync port assembly and work backwards from here. We'll begin by plugging in these 2 cables on the underside of the assembly. You have to be sure to plug them in to the same port in which they came from. Once you're sure these cables are securely plugged into their ports, we can install our plastic cover. Now we'll go ahead and flip this piece over and position it correctly so that we can reinstall our screws. Before we go ahead and reinsert the screws, we'll gently plug the piece back into its port on the logic board. And we're now ready to screw in the 5 screws that hold this piece in place. All that's left to do is to plug our cables back in and snap our frame into place. The first cable we'll plug in leads to the 3G antenna. Again, if you have the Wi-Fi only iPad, this cable does not exist, and you can skip this step. Here's a close-up on just how that cable plugs back in. The next cable we'll want to plug in is for the LCD. Now be sure that when you're closing the iPad, this cable is tucked in its original place where it was held in with tape. Here you can see a close-up demonstration of how that cable goes back in place. Now we'll plug in the cable that leads to the light sensor. And this will simply plug back into its port. Now the final cable that we have to reinsert leads to the digitizer. We'll insert this cable into its two ports, and we'll flip the black tabs in the downward or horizontal direction. This will hold this cable in place with tension and make sure that each of the pins has a secure connection. We'll also want to bend this digitizer cable towards the inside of the iPad. Before we latch the screen in place, we'll want to power the iPad on to confirm that all is working properly. Now, it should be noted that the home button will not yet work because there are two connections on the board that are only made when the screen is closed. When latching the screen back in place, we'll first insert the plastic tabs on the side of the iPad with the volume and screen lock keys. Make sure that side is flush, and then we can begin snapping the clips on the top and bottom of the iPad. And we'll work our way towards the side opposite the volume button. We'll then want to lay our iPad flat and go around once more to secure any free clips. For a full line of parts and services for this model, as well as a number of others, please visit our website, gadgetmenders.com. Thanks for watching.